My first day on the job was a Tuesday, and we met in the gymnasium where our sanctuary was. And on that Monday night, they apparently had played volleyball because they had the volleyball nets up. So I was walking around praying early that morning, have to dip underneath the net, when all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, "You're going to be building a new church." I said, "God, we don't need a new sanctuary. We don't have enough people to build one. We don't have any money. We're broke." 4 years later, we moved into this beautiful sanctuary, paid off the gymnasium, moved into this new sanctuary, and that was just such a remarkable day because on the very first day on the job, I heard from God.
I remember us being in the Econo Lodge, which is still there, that motel, and it was really nerve-wracking for him to move up here. He didn't admit that, but it was. And he was giving up an awesome church, and we loved Peace Chapel, but to come up here, and I remember you could hear all the traffic on I-70, and he looked at me and he says, "What on earth are we doing?" I've never forgotten. I said, "We're in God's will, we're in God's will," and it definitely has been a wonderful 25 years of this church.
When I came to New Life, first of all, I was overwhelmed because I had been at a church, Peace Chapel, north of Springfield, for almost 14 years, loved the church there, and then God tells me to come to New Life. I didn't know anybody in the church. It was totally new to me. But one thing I sensed right off the bat was that Pastor Perkin, the previous pastor, must have instilled within the people this desire and willingness to serve the pastor, because when I came, they were so respectful. And I can say 25 years later, they are as good to me today as they was that very first day.
People were just awesome. I mean, they were just so friendly here, and they had a great foundation with the Perkins and the former pastors. This is a blessed church. I will tell you, this church is on a holy foundation, and I really believe that. It is. I don't want to cry, but it's been a great time for us here. They're just, God's blessed this church. We have so many stories about the blessings of God on this church.
October 27th, 2007 at 1:30 a.m., I had just returned from a 3-week sabbatical where I would spend up to 8 hours a day in prayer. Had a terrible pain, woke up, went around and told my wife, I said, "Babe, I'm having terrible chest pains." Ended up having a massive heart attack that night. Could have easily have died. Went to the ER at St. Mary's as they took me on a gurney to take me out to the helicopter. I passed my wife. Somehow Todd and Tiffany had got there, and suddenly it was just kind of like, you have no transition in place. What happens if you don't live, if you don't make it? I was life-flighted to research. As you can tell, I lived, and 11 years later, I'm doing amazing. But it was at that time God began to deal with me about having some type of transition. And then it was in 2011, toward the fall of that year, when out of nowhere, my wife and I suddenly felt that God was going to place Todd in as the lead pastor. And I said, I would like to do it probably in 5 or 6 years. And I was in my office, and God had spoke to me, "I want you to do it now." And my thought was, God, I can't. I mean, there's no way I can do this, but Nancy calls me and she said, "Babe, can I talk to you about something?" And I said, "Sure, what is it?"
God said it's time, and so I called him up. I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but God's telling me that it's time. Let Todd have it, let him take it. And he took it.
And I said, "Babe, God already told me." So I went to the board. January of 2012, we voted Todd in as the lead pastor. And since that time, God has just blessed this church richly. Well, I can say that one thing I've watched them is that they are not afraid to fail. I've watched them try stuff, and I think it's pretty incredible that they have just continued to reach out and do what I thought was impossible. They do things different than what we did. There's been a few times my wife will lean over to me and said, "You wouldn't do that, would you?" I said, "No." But the only reason I didn't, because I didn't think of it. And so they have a very creative mind, and I appreciate that about them.
I think a lot that I have learned from them is the foster care ministry, because to be honest, the only reason that I really got into this was because of Tiffany, because I wanted to show that I support her. and her vision. And it's been a blessing, but that has really ministered to me to see the compassion that Tiffany has towards, the poor and the needy and the orphans, and like the Bible says. And so that's really the real reason. I don't think I ever told Tiffany that. I did it because of her. I wanted the people to see that we support what they're doing. And I'm glad we did, because it's been a blessing.
When my wife talked about doing foster care, went through the classes, I was in London with Brooke and Justin, and she texted me and she said, we've got 2 new girls coming to live with us. And since we've done it, we realized that foster care is so important. It is just such an important part. And the 2 girls that God brought to us, we've been blessed to have. And then Katrina continues to live with us, and we love foster care. Is it easy? No. And somebody asked me why I got involved in it. I said, well, because Mama said we was going to get involved in it. And that's what came to pass with me. Nobody ain't happy if Mama ain't happy. And so I said, well, if that's what you want to do, I'm willing to support it. Now I'm glad I said yes.
Number one is to stay Christ-centered. I don't care what it is. If it's a program, if it's an Easter egg hunt, it has to be Christ-centered. Everything, and I know this church is doing that. And, even through our music ministry, our youth ministries, I see it in every area. They're keeping Christ in the center. Let's don't get into the bells and the whistles, and all that's great. But if it's not Christ-centered, it's worth nothing. And so we have to keep it. And then number 2 is love your pastors, no matter who they are. If it's Todd and Tiffany, love your staff. Love your staff. Say that to the people in the church. You love your staff, and they're going to love you right back. And it's just going to be that unity that this church has. And I think that's the why this church has God like it is. It's just the unity that it has.
If the church will love the staff like they've loved Nancy and I for these 25 years, this church will continue to move forward. Continue to trust leadership. There's going to be time that the staff's going to lead you in a direction. You may say, I don't understand it, but the legacy is keep trusting leadership. If you don't trust leadership, you shouldn't be going to church here. And they're not always going to do everything that you think is right. And it's not always about what I want, it's about reaching people. But I can say Nancy and I have been so blessed by this church, the impact they've had on our life. I believe that they've impacted us more than we've impacted them. So as a church, keep going after God. Keep trusting staff, keep loving them, and when we visit, I would love to come back someday and you're in 3 and 4 services to see what God is doing. Sky's the limit, what God's going to do within their life.